up. We have a lot to talk about
Hello.
today. Hello, Lisa.
I'm
How are you?
well. How are you?
I am grand. Thank you, thank you, thank you,
Grand.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's it. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been looking
Thank
forward to this.
you so much. I'm getting on my camera set up, so give me 1 second. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, goodness. There we go. Looks like a lot of people
Yeah,
have been waiting on
I
us, too.
know.
Hello. One moment. There we go. All right. Getting my
Yeah.
chair thing set up.
Plug in so I don't lose power. There we go. Yeah, I
Right.
know.
Don't want to
Better
lose your
safe than
juice.
sorry, you know?
Perfect. Yeah, let me take off my headset. That thing looks weird
I
right on
know.
camera. All right, so I guess I'll get started, or we can just wait a little while. I mean, there's a lot of people in here already. So if you don't know, thank you, Lisa, for joining us. Thank you. I found you on Instagram, and I am very, very grateful for you being here. I am Angie B. I own and operate the Exodus Group Foundation. It's a nonprofit working on being a nonprofit. And we work on helping those get out of high control religions. And what I mean by high control religions, those religions that definitely just tell you who you can talk to, who you can be with, who exactly you can talk to, and who you can be, who you have to be in the religion or the group. But then as soon as you start thinking for yourself, and you get out, you're immediately shunned. You're immediately cut off from your family, your friends, your whole support system, everyone that you know. For me personally, I was cut off from my immediate family. And of course, I didn't make any friends outside the organization. So, of course, how do you start
Rebuilding.
from there? Like there's no way to rebuild. And the one thing I don't think we talk about enough on at least the X side is that the grieving process. There's a whole, I don't know if you saw my reel yesterday that I posted of me just being like excited, proud, happy, sad, just all the emotions at one time. And you had to, like, blindly, I walked through it, thank goodness. But that's my first question to you. Like, one, tell me about yourself first. I apologize. But two, where do you start when you're grieving your whole support system just
everything
completely done?
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's so much. Well, real quick about me. So, my name's Lisa Williams. I'm a clinical social worker, and I've worked in grief for almost my whole career. In Baltimore, I'm based in Baltimore, and worked with people who, primarily started with people who had experienced traumatic and unexpected losses, and of varying degrees and kinds. And, I always tell people it's sort of very different than anticipated losses. It's a very different experience. And so started there, but now I've worked with all kinds of grief and run what's your grief, doing online support for a lot of death and non-death loss. And I think the thing we always tell people first is, like, a lot of people feel like that word grief has to be reserved for people who've died, when of course that is not the case at all. Like, grief is our normal and natural response to loss, and that is all loss. It is not just when somebody has died. And so we grieve people who are still alive all the time for so many, so many reasons. But this, I think, when you reached out to me about this, I think one of the things about when this a situation happens, and and the grief happens both directions. It can happen obviously when people leave, but also when people sometimes join and then have to give up
Right.
connections to the people they had before them. And you're that what you described of like everyone, everything feels like it's gone. I'm grieving all of it. It does feel really hard to know where to start. And so the first piece we always tell people is like, one, just be willing to acknowledge that this is grief. Be willing to acknowledge that it is okay to be feeling two things that feel completely opposite at the same time. And I think that like we call it
Yes.
mental health dialectical thinking, but I feel like in simple terms, it's just like feeling two things that feel contradictory. They can feel like they're opposite, of each other. You can feel so many things all at once. You can feel that joy, like you said in your post, like joy and relief and, gratitude and all of it. And then you can feel anger and despair and sadness and devastation. And like, it's all happening in the same moment. I think a lot of times people struggle with that because they feel like these things aren't, it should be one or the other. And so creating space to say, it's normal that I'm feeling all these things, and I need to label a lot of this stuff that I'm feeling and get comfortable acknowledging what I'm feeling around all of these different things. And that's like one place to at least lay a foundation. The other place that we often try to tell people to reground themselves is in themselves, which can be hard when you feel like we're relational beings. So when you feel like you've lost the people around you,
Right.
and you've lost what has given oftentimes a sense of direction in your life, it can feel directionless. And being able to reground and get to know yourself, to say, okay, like I am still the person that I've been. I might be changing, I might be evolving, but like there are still values in me there. I still have a compass that is helping me to see a direction that I'm moving. And to try to sometimes say, even though I don't have these other people, as I rebuild new connections, a new community, I can feel some grounding in who I am. But it's hard in those earliest days to be able to do that. It's so hard.
I know the grounding thing especially is hard because even for me, like especially living in a high control religion, you just, oddly enough, you don't
Yeah.
know who you
Yeah.
are. So you've been told that you've liked apples all your life, and because you were forced apples, you've been eating apples all your life, and that oranges were bad, and you have an orange for the first time. You're like, oh my
Right.
God, that's really good. Like that wasn't
Right.
horrible. That
Well,
was not bad
and
at
I think
all.
that's the thing that, that is so hard too. And that is something that we grieve, is like, when we realize, wow, people who I trusted, or there's these messages that I was told, I put confidence in people who led me to believe certain
Yes.
things. And now when I realize that those things weren't true, they weren't the only way, or they were causing me harm, then it's like I'm grieving my ability to sort of trust and have faith in other people, and to even trust my own judgment. Like, what does it say about
Mm-hmm.
me that I wasn't able to see that there were oranges in the world, and they were good too? And so it is like this process of so much of that sense of ourself and how we trust other people. We really have to create space to acknowledge that that's its own loss as well.
It is. It is. I'm a little further, a little further removed from myself because it's been about 20 years since I've been out. But those who are coming out, like, really, like, they miss going to certain things. Like I missed that friend. I did have to go to my father's funeral about 3 years ago. And so I saw the whole
Wow.
old congregation. And of course, like my old friends, I'm going to put that in quotation marks, came to me, and like one of them came to me literally crying. And she goes, I really miss you. Like, I miss you. Just come back. And I'm like, The person I have to be for you to
It's not
accept
me.
me is
Right.
not me
Right.
anymore at all. And I can't put myself into that box
Yes.
just to say hey to you
And
again.
and I think that being able to say that, you know, a lot of times we love to put things in categories as human, you know, good or bad, right or wrong, good friend, bad friend, good
Right.
thing, bad thing. But there's so much gray, and we can look at stuff and feel like there's parts of that life that I do miss, and there's people I do miss, and they're,
Yeah.
you know, wonderful and all of those things. And also I need to be able to be the person that I am. And but it's really hard when I think people, when they look back and they feel like, oh, well, if I got away from something, I should either write the whole thing off and never, you know, look back, or I should,
Right.
be reconsidering or something like that. And the reality is, of course, that we can grieve things. I mean, we say this with addiction recovery, right? When people get sober, like they grieve that drug, they grieve that addiction, they grieve that. And people are always like, why would you grieve a drug? Why would you grieve something that was ruining your life? And it's like, well, that's not the only thing it was doing. It served certain purposes. And so you've got to create space, even in extreme circumstances, to recognize all that gray. It's never black and white.
It's okay to acknowledge the gray. I'm going to write that down.
It's important. It's like I think a lot of times we've really got to do it to really start the grieving process, you know? Yeah.
What's funny is, okay, so I'm going to let a secret come out right now. The reason I posted that post yesterday. So, I'm not telling too many people this, but there's only 15 people in here right now.
Right.
You know.
Keep the secret.
So, I found my mother's Instagram page, and my mother's completely in right now. Okay. And I've been shunned for about 10 years. I've been out for 20, but she's completely shunned me for about 10. So really hard, because we look alike, act alike, and everything. Yeah, we're twins. And I saw her page yesterday, and I'm not going to go too much into it right now because I want to put her on blast if anybody else is listening. But I'm seeing some things that are kind of questionable, and I'm like, are you opening up? Is your flower starting to bloom? Are you and I'm like, and so in my head I'm like, wait, pause. What if she did come out? What are you gonna do?
And
what, like, real talk, like, what if she came out tomorrow? All that hatred, all that pain that I felt now I can't give it to her. I won't give it to her, because I know that she was only told to do what she was told to do at the time. Because badly when I was in, I'm like, I'm divine. I'm, God's chosen.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, wait. I am proud, but I am also angry. I am here. Yeah. I am also there.
Yeah.
And it is a lot. It's a lot to definitely be like, okay, and hold space for yourself in a point where, and acknowledge those feelings as well.
Oh yeah. And to acknowledge that that's part of the thing about this type of grief and this type of loss that is so complex. There's this woman, Pauline Boss, since the 1970s, she's been doing research on like this type of grief, like grieving in these situations. And one of the things that she talks about so much is that when somebody dies, it's that grief is with you forever. That loss is with you forever.
Yes.
But that loss is final. We know they're gone, and that's it. When someone's still alive with like that living loss, you do have those moments of like hope, or those moments of confusion, or those moments of, well, like, is it going to change? Is something going to be different? Is she going to reach out to me again? Is she going to leave? Should I do something different?
Right.
And we go back and we have this opportunity to be kind of constantly revisiting sometimes these things, or something springs up like this, like you find her Instagram page and then suddenly it's got your wheels turning, like, what does this mean? What is it? And one of the things that Pauline Boss says is like this type of relation, that's an ongoing stressor. It's like this ongoing stressor type of grief that our brains kind of will keep going back to that. And it's hard because we don't know. Like it's all these unknowns about what might happen.
Hello, Summer. How are you? They would be wasted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The lot of them would stay blonde.
Yes. And I think, you know, what you just shared there too is something that I think is part of grieving whenever it is that you leave and look back, but that, you know, that word wasted, right? Wasted time. I think that's one of the things that's really hard is like, you know, people looking back and feeling like, oh, I would have to admit that these years of my life were wasted or wrong or bad. And I think it's so important to remember, again, nothing is black and white in this world. Like it is all gray, and it is not, there are things that made you who you are, even if you're not sure who you are. And there are still relationships that for who you were at that time, they were still valuable, meaningful relationships that you had connection to. And you probably did many good things in the world that, you know, that were part of it. And sometimes being able to see in that grief of being able to say it wasn't a waste, right? It wasn't that we have to throw all of those years away in our minds, but we can, you know, acknowledge the full range of what happened during that time in our lives, you know, the best of it and the worst of it. But I know that's tough. And I imagine you're exactly right that when you're 50, 60, 70, it's probably a lot harder.
It is. I've seen some people in Reddit and then on like Facebook, like, I'm coming out and I'm 60 years old, and now my family, like her grandchildren don't talk to her. And in this organization, like as soon as you're no longer this religion, nobody can talk to you again. So, you know, even if I see you in the grocery store, my baby, you know, my grandson can no longer talk to me, even though they want to run. You can see it in their eyes. They want to run up to me. They want to just do what grandchildren do. And I did it to my mother too. And, you know, they completely shun. So how do you grieve when someone's completely actively shunning you? Like, what's that part in your heart? Like, I know what I did for me, but I want to hear from you. Like, that's a hard thing, especially, well, fortunate for me, I moved out the city. Like I completely moved 100 miles away. So therefore, the chances of me running into anybody, slim to none. And when I do go back to my hometown, whatever, I'm going back home in a second anyway. But I'm not staying here. But for those who are not able to leave their hometown or their city, and you constantly run into people, I've known people who I have lost clients because they know I was in this religion, and like literally clients, I'm not even bringing this up, and they're like, oh, you were that religion? Okay, I am this religion. I had to leave, and I'm like, I don't even bring it up. Like we're working out. We're literally working out. So how do you make space for yourself and listen to yourself in that way?
I think one of the things that this is like a helpful thing in mental health 101 for everywhere and in grief, but you know, that like what's in my control and what's not is so important. And so many of these circumstances with other people, you know, when you run into somebody out there in the world, like you have no control over what they're going to do, how they're going to treat you, how they're going to behave. Like all we can do is check in with ourselves and our own values of like, okay, in a particular moment when I see a person, how do I be the person I want to be in that moment? Like whatever that is. And that might be emotional, it might be hard, but like centering ourselves on who do I want to be in that moment, no matter what another person does. And whether that for some time, you know, whatever that plays out, that's going to be different for everybody. But being able to kind of ground yourself in that. And then I think the other piece that can be hard, like, you know, important but difficult, that's less about in the moment and more about in general with this, is when we're grieving people who've died,
there's so much ritual around it. There's community around it. We have people to support us. We have things that we do. You know, we don't have that when we grieve these living losses.
No.
And so part of it is, how do I create a little bit of that for myself? How do I figure out what feels meaningful, and sometimes to really have ritual that allows you to say, this is my kind of saying goodbye.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be still that like ongoing revisiting when you find mom's Instagram page and like all that stuff.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't mean that you do the ritual and then you shut the door to it. Just like if somebody died, having a funeral doesn't shut the door. You know, you're still grieving it. But I think it allows you sometimes to be able to create that space to say, I've decided that I'm going to not let this control me. These these interactions. I'm not going to let this, you know, this moment where I see them in the store and I'm reminded that they won't even look at me.
Right.
That I've sort of said the goodbye I need to say, so that in that moment I can just focus on who do I want to be in this moment? Who am I now in the world?
Right.
And then not let that kind of take over the rest of my day. And that it can be hard work, but ritual, it can provide a little bit of grounding for us to be able to do that. So I always tell people, like, some people are really good at self-creating rituals, and other people, and other people like are like, oh, this is weird. Is this silly? I'm like, no, it's not silly. Like, create what works for you, and it's different for everybody.
Wow. Yeah, unconsciously, that's what I did. I did rituals when I did funerals for my family when I was younger, like when I was first out.
Yeah.
And that did really help. Surprisingly, like, you know, I wrote down, you know, hey, I love you, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
And I constantly wrote them notes and burnt them. And later, it just came like I would do it once a month, and then it became every 6 months, and then it became like, you know what? Are you good? Yeah, I'm good. Oh, that's odd. Okay. And so that's what I tell people too, is to write letters or, write, you know, do some type of ceremony. I think I told that this summer too. I said, you know what, if we need to do a funeral, I'm here for a funeral if you want to.
I mean, it's, you know, it's doing those, and they're ongoing, and it can be for other things. It can be for, you know, their birthday or a holiday or something, you know, depending on what that religion is that you're coming from. There's obviously different traditions of what you would do or not do. But for some people, that it does become symbolic to say, okay, I don't have a relationship with that person anymore, but I can do something to honor that in a different way. If I normally wouldn't have gotten them a gift, maybe I donate a gift to a shelter, or maybe I do something where I still put good in the world, you know, in a way that acknowledges that that relationship was meaningful and I feel a loss, but, you know, I've decided to kind of ritualize that by doing something a little bit different. And that really, for some people, can, you know, help some people for sure.
I like that idea, donating to a shelter in the name of that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I love that idea, because you're still giving love into the world, but, you know, you're still giving out and helping someone else too. So that's amazing.
You know, it's, and again, like, it's just finding the things that feel like they kind of work for you, because I think it's acknowledging that too. Like, it's going to be ongoing. It's going to be, you know, you can do the things early and those might mean something then, and then you realize, wow, it's 10 years later and now something else feels meaningful. You know, maybe it shifts a little bit with time.
Yeah, I will say, and I do say it gets easier. Sometimes I don't think you ever get over it. Like I said, me crying on Instagram yesterday. I don't think I'm ever going to get over it. Even if, even if she doesn't come out, fine, cool. I'm actually okay with that. But, you know, it's one of those things, like, you know, some days, like Mother's Day used to be very, very hard for me. And we didn't really celebrate Mother's Day, but of course you see everybody on Instagram and on social media. Their mom. And and I'm like, shut up.
resentful that you're seeing like other people with their good relationships with their
Right.
moms, but then you feel guilty that you feel resentful because you're like, of course, I want you to be happy with your mom, but I'm also, you know, and I think it's that, like, it's being able to say that too. Like, no, I can be really happy for my friend that she has that.
Right.
And also I can be a little bit jealous and,
I could be a
you
little
know,
jealous.
I can have, like, that can come up. That's okay. I can own that that's part of the grief of it, is that it comes up. And it does change with time. I think that's one of the things I always say to people, that it's not necessarily that the weight of grief gets lighter, but it's that we get stronger and we learn how to carry it more easily.
Yes.
And I think that that is, you know, what happens. It's like, as we have more time and practice and experience figuring out what are the things that help, what are the things that, you know, is it rituals? Is it creating space for my emotion? Is it, you know, writing that letter to them, or writing, you know, maybe not literally send to them.
Don't mail it, okay? Do not mail the letter.
Not to mail. The letter that we write, yes, exactly. What we would say to them, you know, to get some of that out. But finding some of those things. And then with time, you know, we do get stronger and able to, I think, carry the weight of it. But then there will be those moments where just like you feel like you're collapsing under the weight of it again, and it can feel like the early days. And a lot of that is, you know, when it can be moments where something in the world triggers it.
Right.
It can also just be that sometimes when other life stuff is going, like when we're emotionally drained because of everything else, when life is stressful, you know, whatever, then it's like the weight of it can bubble back up again, and all of a sudden we're like, God, I can't, I'm feeling crushed under this all over again.
Right.
So, and knowing that that's normal, you know, I think sometimes people will feel like they have one of those days like you described, where they just melt down and they're, you know, it's so hard, and they're like, wow, I thought I dealt with this. I must not have really dealt with it, because I, you know, this hit me like a ton of bricks. No, it doesn't mean you didn't deal with it. It just means that the trajectory of this is that it's up and down, and usually you're gradually always moving up, but with ups and downs along the way. And so it doesn't mean you didn't grieve right, or you didn't deal with it. It just means that this is ongoing, and you'll oftentimes have the ups and downs. It's normal.
Thank you for saying the ups and downs. This past week, it's been a whole lot of ups and downs. And someone said that they're like, okay, looking at your heartbeat when it's flatline, what is it? And it's like it's dead. I said, okay, so when we're going ups and downs, that's our heartbeat. So therefore, it's okay to be an up and downer, because we don't want this. Okay?
Yep, we definitely don't want flat. Well, right. And I mean, I think it's true. And it's like, we don't want numb avoidance, right? Like,
right.
Oftentimes people early on, they're like, I just want to not feel this pain. And so then that's when you get like, okay, I'll just compartmentalize it. I'll just sleep all the time. I'll just throw myself into working 100 hours a week so that I don't think about this loss. And it's like, well, no, not feeling, you know, the highs and the lows are hard, but we don't want you to be not feeling things, because that means we're just like stuffing all the stuff down.
Right.
And it's so important to go, wait, we got to actually put the stuff out here in order to deal with it, because it's not going to go away if we just keep stuffing it.
So that brings me to one of my questions. We're doing the questions really quick today. So what healthy ways of coping? I mean, you know, we know most of us, drugs, alcohol, and sex. Okay, yes, school and eating.
Yep.
I'm a personal trainer. I'm a wellness coach, and that's one of the first things I say is like, what are your emotional eating food? And they look at me like I'm weird. And I'm like, I know you emotional eat. We wouldn't be here, and most of us do it anyway. So therefore, what's your emotional eating food? Okay, and I even tell them, I said, I'm not even mad at your emotional eat. Go ahead, emotional eat. Now, while you're doing it, what is the emotion that you're eating with? Let's talk to that side while we're in that state. Okay, once she comes down and she gets what she wants, minus grapes. I love the blood of Jesus Christ in the bottle. Amen.
Love it.
So while I'm having that moment and I'm having my glass of wine, I'm like, okay, and then I'll journal out what we're feeling. so we're not
Yeah.
staying there. But
Yeah.
what are healthy ways of coping?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we always try to encourage people is like, when it comes to coping, rather than like starting with, let me look for some checklist or what works for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, like, let's start by looking at what has worked for you in the past, because coping is so different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always like, when you think of times that have been hard and you think about how you comforted yourself or how you did things that helped you to pull out of it, or who were the people who were the ones that you felt like you could open up to, or who were the people who got you off your sofa when you had not left the house in 7 days, but they actually like dragged you, like, let's talk about that. And it might be for smaller things. It might be for losses that were not nearly as devastating as this, or just other bad stretches. But like, what were those things? Let's start there. What's the music that you put on when you feel the worst, so that you start to build, not like what's the checklist of self-care that you saw on an Instagram post, but like, what have I used in my own life? And when people struggle with it, I'll go even back to like, let's just start with when you were a kid. Like, when you were a kid, what did you love to do? Like, what were the things that brought you comfort? What were the things? And so starting there and recognizing that the way that grief works, it's coping with the grief very actively, like the loss and that stuff. And then it's just building up our well-being in other areas. Like, that's part of grief coping. It's always doing both. Because if you're not building up your general well-being, you're not going to have the energy to deal with the grief stuff.
That is so true.
So you've got to be taking care. So a lot of times people are really surprised if they come in for, grief counseling or working on grief stuff. And I'm always starting with these questions about, like, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? What are you doing? Are you getting outside? Like, what are you? And people are like, I thought we were going to dig into like all of the, I'm like, before we can dig into any of that, I just want to know how you're functioning as just a human, like a living animal human. And so I always tell people, start there. Like, look at your coping in the most basic ways of start with those things. And then start to build up of, how do I make sure I have the well-being stuff? So how do I make sure I know what the music is that I put on when things feel dark, or I know who the people are who I call when, everything feels overwhelmed, do all that. I know some of the somatic stuff. Do I know how to do breathing? Do I like doing tapping? Do I like going to, what are those things? So that you have like your well-being toolbox stuff. And then you can start to dig into the grief toolbox stuff of really going into, how do I deal with some of the loss things. And when it's coping with some of the lost things, I think one of the things I always love to tell people when it's like people that can really help is this idea of like a life imprint, of thinking about like everybody we encounter in our lives, they leave imprints on us, good and bad. And part of grieving people is oftentimes being able to look at that and say, I get to make an active decision about when I grieve someone who's gone from my life. What of the imprint they left on me do I want to lean into more and sort of grow in myself and celebrate and cherish, because I'm so glad that they taught me that thing, or I learned it because of them, or it was a value that they instilled in me. And then what things do I want to distance myself? Like, what imprints did they leave on me that now part of my grieving is making a decision to leave some of those things behind. And that will be part of that process. And I think that can sometimes be a good starting point in some of the grief coping, is like, how do I start to think of my identity as something that I'm shaping? They impacted me. They're still here in the best ways, but I'm trying to let go of some of the worst ways. So that's one that I think helps. And then with the other thing with the grief coping piece, one of the—
You muted yourself. Where'd you go? No, don't leave me. No. There we go. Okay.
emergency alert on my phone.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, it disappeared. So the other thing that I think can really help, when we're looking at the grief, but the grief and the piece of it and leaning into that is just oftentimes we look for this future of like, okay, here's my ideal state when I'm feeling at my best self,
right.
Or like, here's where I want to get. And one of the things that we'll often talk about is like, let's just look at this week. And like, if nothing else, change it. Like, if there's nothing else, you can't change anything else that like from these big things, just like what would help you this week to have a little bit of hope, to have a little bit of comfort, to have a little bit of joy. Like, let's just start there.
Right.
And that often becomes a lot more attainable than like when we're looking at our blue sky ideal self. That can start to feel really overwhelming, especially when it's dark. Like,
yeah.
when you're like, how am I ever going to get there?
I don't even know what next week, next month looks like. Let's start with today. You're right. That makes sense.
Yeah, let's start there. And then, the good old standards, writing, writing is always...
writing is always amazing. I make my clients write a lot of times, especially those who are over a certain weight, because most times I found out that that's when they're really emotional eating. They're really emotional eating to hide something, not just because, it tastes good, which is fine, as we said about me and my blood of Jesus. And once they figure that out, like, wait, Angela, I thought I dealt with that. I'm like, no, I'll say, and I name it. I'm like, okay, so baby Angela needs this. Okay, so what is child Angela, baby? Let's name her. Okay, we name her. My child's side is Ashley. And so I'm like, okay, so what does Ashley need today? Ashley needs XYZ.
Yeah.
Okay, so Angela might not need that. That's fine. But as Ashley doesn't get this, she's going to ruin Angela's whole day. So therefore...
That's exactly, like, we can do that. Like, going back, reparenting ourselves in this way of being able to say, like, we can take care of that piece of ourselves. And it takes a conscious effort. I love that, like, I love naming that part of ourselves. And I also think it's helpful to name, like, sometimes I'll tell people, name your anxiety part of yourself, name if for people who are in substance recovery, like name your addicted brain, like do that, because then you can have those conversations of like, what do they need right now? What are they trying to say to me right now? How can I listen to that? And then how can I respond to all those things? It's like the movie Inside Out, kind of.
Yes. I love that movie.
Yeah. Giving everybody kind of a little bit of space so that we can, take care of it. But take care of yourself in the way that you need to be taken care of. I think that's huge.
It is. It's huge. My sister, me and her were talking. I named her. We were talking about her child side, and she goes, well, she's an irritant. I said, stop looking her as an adult. She's not an adult.
No.
She's a child. Like, you have children, okay? Do you expect them to go to work and wash the clothes and wash? She goes, no. I said, okay, so if she's 3, where is she at now?
Yeah.
And okay, how do you explain this to a 3-year-old? And even in that moment when I was going through on Instagram yesterday, I was about my child's side. I mean, she was about 5, 6. Now I had to go back and meditate. I'm like, okay, what is it that you're really mad about? Yeah. And once that came out, I'm like, oh, then all of it cleared. Like, literally. Still a little wounded, yes.
Yep.
Still went to bed early that day, yes. Held my pillow tight, but was I still crying and I don't want to say overreacting, no, but overly emotional. Let me say it that way. No, that's when that stopped. Once she got heard, and once we were able to conversate that side, that's when that kind of went, okay. Do I still want to work today? No, we don't have to work today. I canceled my appointments.
Yep. Yeah.
I put on Netflix. I looked at my husband and said, buy pizza. I'm not here. And
yeah. Well, and I think that's it. And it's part of the reason too that I think it can be so valuable when people struggle with that idea of how do I take care of myself? How do I cope? How do I do? Why it can be so valuable to go back and think about your childhood, right? What comforted you? What did you need? How did you self-soothe, or how did people soothe you then? Because sometimes that's exactly the piece of yourself that you need to be able
to take care of and comfort in grief, especially when it's that if you've lost those people who were part of your child, you know, who were
Right.
there, like you've lost a lot of those connections, and so it definitely helps.
Yeah, I tell my husband to give me hugs, and at first when we first got together, he looked at me like I was weird. And now he's well programmed, so when I say give me a hug, he goes, all right. I didn't get a lot of touch when I was a child,
Yep.
So now adult Angela, all the Angelas needed hugs, and so every once in a while I'm like, I need a hug. And that's one of my methods of self-soothing. My friends know it. They go, Angela needs a hug. Somebody go get her. Somebody go get Angela.
Yeah. But like you describe it so perfectly, which is that thing to do of being able to reflect back and go like, what did I need as a child that I didn't get? And how do I make sure I can get that now? How do I give that to myself? How do I ask other people for it now? It might not be the people who I wish had given it to me.
Very true.
You know, being able to say I deserved it then. They couldn't give it to me, but I now can figure out how to give it to myself and surround myself with the kind of people who can give it to me.
And we're willing to give it to you. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Which is huge, being able to do that.
So thank you so much, Lisa. It's been about 40 minutes now. We did start early. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your time, your energy, your blessings. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad, and I'm so glad to know you're out here doing this work with people, because there are just so many people who I know need it. So.
Honestly, I created this as a safe landing spot because it took me about 15 years to get not only my mind right, but my life right.
Yeah.
To stand on my own 2 feet afterwards. And I'm like, you know what? I wanted to create a safe spot to land for other people. And it was just so hard. I mean, it shouldn't, like I said, I'm glad it took me 15 years. I wish it didn't.
Sure.
I wish it didn't. But you know what? 15 years is better than 85. So you know what?
It's so true. And when you look at the amount of time, you know, I think that's the thing is like we think everything should happen quickly. But when we look at how much of our lives are spent with a particular religion or with particular people or particular, then to be able to think about like, why would it only take this myth of like, oh, we get over stuff in a year, or we get over like when we look at how many years that shaped everything about who we were, of course it takes us so much longer. And with what you're describing, where it's, you know, so every aspect of everything.
The whole thing.
If you had been like, oh, and I got over it in 15 months and I was stable and everything was great, I'd be like, no, you did not. That's just not how it works. That's just not how it works.
Let's hold on for about 2 or 3 years and see. Call me to mate.
Right. Exactly. Like you're still in it. You might not see that you're still in it, but you're still in it.
Very much so.
So no, I really appreciate this, and thank you so much for inviting me on to chat about it.
So I'm just gonna say this just for all of everybody in land. We are hosting the Exodus group. My channel is hosting a virtual 5K in April, starting April 1st, as a nonprofit. So y'all DM me or look at my page to join that race. You can pay for it, your race ticket now, or sponsor. We are looking for sponsors, but to help get our 501c3 and our nonprofit status. And yeah, I am really, really helping that people not to spend 15 years in transition.
Yeah, get the support from so you can pass on the lessons learned.
Yeah,
that's
sooner rather than later, because I wish I would have known, but I'm glad I know now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
thank you. Anything else from you, madam? I mean, I don't.
No. I mean, we have some articles on our website on whatsyourgrief.com, and our podcast, which is What's Your Grief. We have some things about grieving people who are still alive and non-death losses and things like that. So if people are looking to like dig into this more, you can check out some stuff.
And if I can, I will link some stuff from my website to yours. So therefore, yes, I've gotten hit by 2 or 3 people coming out. Like, how do I grieve this person? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And that's when I just hit you up. I'm like, you know what? I think I saw somebody one time on Instagram.
think I saw somebody who talks about this non-death, this ambiguous grief that we have. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, and people, you're welcome if you want to DM me specifically. If people are like not able to find any of that stuff, I'm always happy to point people in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your love, your light. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.